to BGSS Spark chat about Service Design 101, what it is, what's it good for, why do we need it, and what are the kind of skills or competencies, I suppose, that we think a good service designer needs, and what are the kind of typical outputs that you might see or you might produce if you're getting into service design. Personal views from myself and Steve. So yeah, let's crack on. Glad to have you all here, and thanks to the Digital City Festival and Fern at BGSS for helping coordinate this, get us online at the right time with the right stuff. So yeah, thank you. Right, so what are we going to talk about today? It is a personal view from us around what service design is, and why it's needed, and what we value most, really, or certainly what I value most in the service designers that we have at Spark, doing great work across a whole raft of different types of projects, and what you might expect from a service designer. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So a little bit about us. I'll start and then I'll hand over to Steve. So I've been at Spark, well, BGSS first off, about 5.5 years ago or a bit more. Created or started the UX team as it was then, so that BGSS could get involved in those discussions about the kind of things that they might build. Up to that point, they've been doing amazing delivery work, but hadn't really had the chance to get involved in kind of deciding what they should be building, and how, rather than just how they might go about it. And the UX team at that point comprised user research, a bit of information architecture, product design, and then service design became a thing. And then we moved across to Spark to join their strategy team. So now we've got strategy, service design, product design, user research, and excitingly content design, as well as our practices in Spark. Like most service designers, it kind of secured its route to get to where I am, through gaming, advertising, digital design agencies here and in Australia, and now back here. And that's me. So I'll hand you over to Steve.
Thank you, Thad. I'm Steve Silhoney. I'm a senior service designer with Spark and BGSS. Been with the BGSS Spark combo for almost 7 years now. Started as a BA with doing UX at the same time. And we realized way back then, it was actually my first project when I joined, that we needed to venture out into UX and begin to have conversations earlier on what clients wanted and why they were asking for these things. And so yeah, that began the journey into UX at BGSS and ultimately into Spark and to the design consultancy that we have now. I got many years in financial services, and I love to ski. That's the most important thing. As Thad mentioned, we're up to 70 designers now, which is amazing, because that's pretty much doubled in sort of 15 months, I would imagine, maybe even 12, I'm not sure. But we've got, as Thad mentioned, that we've got a number of different practices and a very talented group of people. We're scattered, just a little bit about us, just get a couple slides on that, just a sort of bit more context. We're a close-knit group, but we're spread out, mainly UK, but we do have Spark and design people within New York and Lisbon now. Couldn't get Lisbon on the map there, so I do need to adjust this. But yeah, we're growing, and from a service design perspective, I think we're up over 25 service designers now. I think, Thad, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, about that, yeah. Biggest Spark.
Yeah. And lots of really good clients from sort of, from big to small. And our service designers are making a difference at these organizations, and it's really good to see. But as we kind of mentioned, there's this connection between SPARCK and BGSS is quite significant for us. Not only are they a bigger company, they've got over 1,500 technologists, but SPARCK is this front-ending the conversations, as I mentioned, and we're sort of classifying ourselves as around this theme of design to deliver. And that's a really powerful combination. Quite often we've talked about the superpower that SPARCK has is BGSS because of the strength of the ability to deliver the designs that we help our clients with. Our approach, fairly simple, double diamond. Whenever we talk about service design, the good old double diamond comes up, but to sort of combine that design to deliver sort of mantra, we've sort of put a little bit of a spin on it with the deliver and color coded it accordingly. But we are based on, SPARCK is a design thinking organization that is at our core, and that's the type of things that we are trying to achieve. So this is service design talk, and I thought we would jump right into it now. And so what is service design? Again, as Thad mentioned, this is kind of a personal view with sort of two different perspectives on service design from both myself and Thad, and just based on our experience, what we actually do as service designers. But just to start off, I want to answer the question, well, what is a service first? Let's build this context up a bit. I suppose in the context to sort of distinguish between the two, goods are the tangible, consumable, and require more transactional methods of exchange, like pens and sunglasses and shoes and so on and so forth. Whereas services are more intangible, don't end up with ownership, and they things like medical treatment, postal service, transport, banking. And I think the difference here is really around that services are more relationship oriented, and it implies a beginning and a middle and an end, whereas the goods are more transactional. And there's this, but most organizations right now don't really sit on one end or the other. They kind of have this sit in between, this blurred line between goods and services. There's a lot of overlap for most companies. So the type of organizations that we interact with, that's the space of which we tend to meet. The types of companies are definitely they're offering something, but they're offering a relationship service that spans a certain amount of time. Just for clarity, I'll say that products are specific goods that are being sold. For example, running shoes are goods, but Air Jordans are products that Nike sells, just to sort of clarify that point. Now I'm going to offer a bit of a definition. So again, this is kind of a personal view. There's other definitions out there, but for me, this definition sort of is a bit more closer to home. It describes a bit more what we do, and it's maybe it's a bit more geekier, nerdier, but I think it sort of rings true for it. I'll give it to you here. So a service is an exchange of value across a life cycle of a primary relationship that satisfies a number of needs and aims to achieve a set of desired results. And the one in the words in red are particularly relevant. This exchange of value between these two entities. With there's other primary relations, there are other relationships in this, but the primary one is key here. And it's you're trying to achieve something on both ends, either needs or desired results. And for service design, well, service design is the design of great experiences that look like that. So what? So you might be saying, sounds interesting, but what do service designers, what can they offer? Why service design is a thing? We have people within our organization that can solve problems that you may come up in the service journey. We have, product managers, we have business SMEs, we have analysts, and and I guess my initial reaction, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I suspect that it's not all sunshine and roses for many businesses and organizations. And I'll try to make the argument for service design, and answer that question with sort of separating this into two questions. First is, so what has changed now that makes service design really important? And for me, it's these aspects. It's this, again, as I mentioned before, this blurred line between services and products. And the rapid pace of change that we are seeing now is just, it's phenomenal. And, that's obviously spurred on by digital technologies and the information sort of changes in the way information is handled, and the information, fourth generation information industrial age. I can't remember the term, but the need to stay relevant in amongst new competition, the increased size and complexity of services, they're certainly growing, connected through all the different facets of an organization, and the interconnectedness and the dependency of these services within your organization makes it a bit unwieldy. So what are service designers doing differently that can make a positive impact across those core changes that we're seeing? Well, the things that we're doing, not just solving the problems, but we're solving it in particular ways that is making a significant impact. Now that is, we're bringing in a design ethos, and that is about empathy and evidence-based design and experimentation. We're being, of course, as you might know from if you have certain understanding of service design, people-centric, and that's through research, through co-creation, through storytelling. Something that we spend a lot of time doing as service designers is breaking down silos through collaboration, traversing boundaries, connecting the dots where other people working in the little silos can't imagine. To do this, we're visualizing things at many levels. We're zooming in and zooming out, and some of these diagrams and things that I think that'll get onto will really help out this visualization. The way we do things, the workshopping, the consultation with people, the getting people more involved is bringing innovation out more broadly. And people are trying out things, and people in organizations are becoming more innovative and actually doing innovation where they weren't before. And that's actually exciting people. And we're also testing the service. We're testing this end-to-end journey, not just facets of it in little segments, but we're testing the whole thing, and that's about reducing risk. And a previous client mentioned something when we explained the whole process and got him involved in it, and the penny dropped for him, and it was just like, I get it. This is to avoid regret spend. We're testing this thing early in the design phase to avoid that pain. But I wanted to sort of give a little description of the roles that we actually play as service designers, because we wear a number of different hats, and I thought I'd use the RACI matrix as a way of describing these sort of different hats that we wear. And some hats we wear significantly, and some hats we wear just as contributors, or we're informers. This is sort of a one-way relationship here. So we're responsible for the design aspect in terms of the service design, of course, but we contribute to the conversation and change as a change agent. We are at minimum informed what strategy is, but we do play a role in the strategy life cycle, if you will. And of course, we are accountable for the building that capability, building that service line capability within organizations. So just a little bit about each of those four quadrants. So as a strategist, it's about, we often get handed strategy or the why of the project, but sometimes, like I said, we do play a larger role in this. We do actually have a voice at the table, and we do influence strategy. But as service designers, our key function when we understand the strategy is to bridge the gap between that strategy and execution, making the strategy real through the use of service design. Now, this is a little diagram that I've come up. It's gotten a little bit of notoriety, mainly because of its interesting nature. But as designers, I was looking for an analogy that sort of said where service design fits in the sort of design ecosystem. And I sort of said, oh, it's the meat in the sandwich. And I looked for a bit of imagery that sort of described that. And this is what one of my colleagues came up with. And really, it says that when we're doing design, it's really about bringing that and participating in strategy design, and it's about bringing product design up once we know more about what needs to be delivered at a product level, and incorporating ops model design. This thing off to the side, pickle example here. But the thing that bridges the whole design ethos is research, and that research is that stick down the middle. But at the core, service design is that link, and it brings it brings it all together. We often are doing a lot of these things at the same time on projects. Maybe not so much. It's not our primary role, but we are participating in pretty much all of these things to some degree or another. But we've got to dive down in the detail. As designers, particularly service designers, we dive down in the detail. And this is about breaking down the service into its components and understanding how those things interact and interrelate at a front to back level, from end to end. And these are the kind of things that you see on the screen that are the ones that we are trying to understand, trying to see what fits, and trying to get the right aspect of that in place for the service to work. The other aspect, the other quadrant, is this change agent. And for this to work well, for change to work, we have to usually work with a designated change person, change management or consultant who's a business consultant, or a particular SME who's going to be the responsible party once we finish with the change project. But the goal that we're trying to achieve with this is about engaging and activating people. And we do this through first creating this communication, constantly be able to communicate what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve it, getting those users involved, getting those people and those other people on board, embedding the experience early and making sure that we can understand and get the feedback from them. But once that experience is embedded, then there is more investment on their part to be able to accept that and be able to be champions in their own right for the benefits that they're trying to, that we're offering up through this change process. Now on the capability builder side, so there's as we move through projects, we're always trying to leave a service design legacy through education and empowerment, empowering certain people, particularly in those organizations. But service design is very interconnected subject matter, and therefore we often go a bit broader in our capability building activities. And as a design company, we're often instill a design-led approach to change. And given that we're part of a technology consultancy, the transformation is typically digital one. I know service design isn't by definition a technical change, but it often involves some. And in a high-speed digital change type of environment, technology is at the core. So we're doing many things when it comes to building, and we can't just pass on a service design legacy. We are passing on a design-led transformation legacy. The other aspect I wanted mention just regards to other things that we do on the capabilities building side and things that we need to keep in mind is this design ladder. And not all organizations are equal. And that's particularly true when it comes to the maturity in design. We have to take into account where they are on this design ladder in order to tailor our approach and our language and our capability building accordingly. So it's quite significant. Now, one of the last thing I want to leave you with before I pass it back over to Thad is that, yes, all projects feel this way. All service design projects feel this way. But, the thing that, it can feel crazy, can feel sort of fuzzy and uncertain at the beginning. But as we stay the course and stick to our approaches and our methodology, things get clear. And we have to, talk to our project teammates to make sure that, don't worry guys, this is actually going to get better. It is, I know it's a bit crazy at the moment, but it does, it does improve. And you'll see as the service becomes clear, things become, people become more on board. This line of clarity just sort of flattens out. And it really is true. This is how every project feels. Thad, over to you.
Right, okay, so given what Steve has said, we are in the business of designing services that help someone do something, meets their needs now and in the future. But as service designers, we seek to understand what the pieces of the service design puzzle are and how they best fit together. And there are quite a few different ways to do that. But this is what I'm trying to get across here is what attitude skills I think are important in allowing us to do that well. So I suppose first off, with this one, no person is an island. Same goes for service designers. As Steve has said, our work is closely aligned with what our other colleagues are doing in SPARCK and BJSS, firmly based on solid research, evidence-based as much as possible. When products or interfaces are part of the service strategy, which they most often are, and having intuitive, accessible products really makes that service sing. But we're there to figure out what the different bits are and how best to put them together. So, sorry, Steve, can you just take the next slide? But yeah, so just to reiterate, we design to deliver, okay? We don't just walk away having handed over some designs. And in fact, the double diamond with a twist that Steve showed earlier was maybe slightly misleading, because it's not just SPARCK at the front end of that work, doing that design work. Quite often, in fact, more often than not nowadays, we're a blended team from the get-go. So, we work right from the start through to delivery with our BJSS colleagues and indeed other suppliers as well. Very rare that it's just us these days. Right, so yeah, what I'm going into is a personal view about and what I value most in people who are service designers at SPARCK. It's not a kind of competency review of any sort. Although we have done that in SPARCK, we have a matrix of competencies and a toolkit that aligns to that, and ways of working and all that kind of thing. But that's not what this is going to be. So instead, sorry, Steve, there we go. Yeah, this is a more personal view. So without any further ado, first off, relentless curiosity. I mean, if you're working in that messy, fuzzy front end of things where solutions aren't obvious, you've got to be incredibly curious. You want to get at the nub of things. And service designers are curious about people and technology in particular, certainly at SPARCK, given the nature of the work we do, the company that we're a part of. are always looking to understand how best technology and people can work together. The key thing here, though, is not knowing is okay. Actively listening, as Steve alluded to earlier, is critical. Next is empathy. It's critical for us. We're a human-centered design agency. We're there to represent the voice of the user and what we're doing. That kind of third part of the, if you've got business and you've got tech, with that other part of the Venn diagram, it really does really make the other two work by making sure that they're in service of users. And it's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding the problem, the issues from their perspective. Understanding what's going on in people's heads helps us understand what problems we should actually be trying to solve. Not often the ones that are put forth at the beginning, by the way. And observing real users interacting with the service, a service safari, if you like, is really useful to uncover things that they may not actually be able to articulate themselves. Right, so then big picture thinking. This is key to being a good service designer, because as Steve said earlier, we're zooming in, we're zooming out, we're looking at things from a lot of different perspectives. Our role is to often actually consider what's beyond the obvious immediate project boundaries, the organization that we might be working with, or the service who are providing the service that we're looking to deliver on. Quite often it's looking beyond that to understand where our users have been before they get to us, where we might send them afterwards. And often looking at different ways or organizations that are part of that service or could be part of that service, reconfiguring those connections or relationships to make things work better. So big picture thinking, understanding that is really key. Facilitation. Our workshops are key, totally key to everything that we do. We're all about working collaboratively, not just with client, stakeholders, project team, but crucially users as well, and not just in the research stage, but actually throughout. Co-creation is really important for us. We use those throughout the life cycle of a project. But it's also a bit more than that. It's also about how we engage with each other. Quite often we're the bridge builders on projects. And we're there to facilitate discussions of all sorts within and across teams or different strands of the team to get that overall view. Striking a balance between subject matter expert and coach through facilitating the right approach to engage teams on a day-to-day basis. Quite often enables us to get the best from the client and the team. And then there's joining the dots. I mean, it's key if you're understanding the big picture. There's a lot of information there, but what does it actually mean? I mentioned reconfiguring relationships, say, amongst partners in some kind of service endeavor, for example. It's trying to figure out how best things should join together. Spotting patterns in behaviors, interactions, processes, outcomes. Really important to identify those common pain points or areas of friction, but also obviously good candidates for improvement. Slicing and dicing research findings in different ways helps us see those patterns, viewing them through a variety of lenses. So needs, experience, actors, time, touch points, all those kind of things. Different perspectives cast different light on the problem and the solution. And as the diagram that Steve showed before, being able to embrace that ambiguity in a project is and be comfortable with it is really key. It's part and parcel of what we do. Change is inherently uncomfortable. Some people really don't like it. Others don't mind it so much, but generally change is hard. And when you're starting off where you know least and trying to get to a solution, you need to be comfortable with that, because a lot of other people aren't necessarily. Acknowledging it enables us to examine and analyze our findings or ideas from different perspectives and make those kind of breakthroughs, I suppose, that enable, great change. And really, you've got to start with an open mind. Focus on what we do know and what we don't know. Ask the right questions and get to that. Narrow down our options as we go. And then there's visualization. The key part of what we do as service designers is actually, I suppose, bring clarity to complex things. And if we find ways to, diagrams are kind of a large part of what we do, is making sense of those complex things in a variety of ways to tell different types of story, to bring the project team, client, stakeholders on that journey, and help them understand. It's fundamental to what we do. When you're visualizing something, consider the data, the audience, the flow, the level of detail, because it always changes depending on what we're trying to do. Sometimes we do those quick and dirty user journeys, service blueprints. Feels like years ago on a whiteboard when we were all in the same room. Or it could be if you're actually, creating an artifact that's for outside consumption, then you can make it polished, shiny. But yeah, there's lots of different ways we do that. Okay, but ultimately it's about storytelling. Getting people's buy-in for new products and services is really critical. When you're trying to change something, radical change, you need to bring them on that journey and get their buy-in early. That applies equally to that internal buy-in versus, so if we're proposing what can be perceived in some cases as quite seismic organizational change, and winning over existing or new users, makes ideas more understandable, the future's more concrete, and opportunities more impactful. I suppose, whether you're telling that story with words or diagrams or pictures, it's important to be clear about the problem, what the problem is that you're solving, who the protagonist is, and what their experiences are. And how do we get there to solutions? Well, experimentation, prototyping, being hands-on is crucial to what we do as service designers. Testing interactions, processes, communications between parties in a service, testing the services or products that are part of the, they might have a suite of products that become a part of the service that we're designing. It takes many forms, physical, digital, abstract or real. And we can test that, prototype those things in a variety of ways. The level of fidelity, I suppose, depends on, what we need to prove out at the time and who our audience is. I suppose the last thing I want to end on is, I think, when it comes to what I think good service designers need, is they need to have a love of people, because we're there to solve people's problems. Wherever someone sits on a spectrum, introvert, extrovert, somewhere in the middle maybe, what's that, ambivert, they're engaging with people all the time. They're building bridges, breaking silos, speaking with people, observing them, and ultimately you're only going to do that well if you want to improve their lives in some way. That's what service design is there to do, because technology should serve people, right? They're the end game, if you like. So having conversations, not always easy, but it's probably the most important piece, because it's only through that kind of dialogue that we reach that understanding, mutual understanding, which certainly the beginning of a project or in a hard project is going to be quite often the difference between success or failure. So they're the kind of qualities, I suppose, that I think are really important. But as service designers, we're kind of expected to deliver some key artifacts a lot of the time. You've got a flavour now of maybe what I think the service designer brings to the table when they're delivering the service design sandwich that Steve talked about. But how do they do that? So there are some key outputs that you probably need to be familiar with. So the first of those is a persona or an empathy map or something that basically gets across the key aspects of the people that we're there to solve problems for in designing a service. We don't always create these. Quite often we're working with our research colleagues. But this is almost like our Bible in a way. It captures the different behaviors of a specific type of user that we're designing for. Or you might have some kind of system map. There's lots of different versions. But this one is a kind of causal loop diagram in a way. The positive and negative flows between different actors or entities in a service could be really useful. So this is kind of the big picture stuff. And then we've got the ecosystem map. So this is, really important to understand how that end-to-end service journey is supported by, interlinked internal or external service components, to understand what other possible relationships your service might have. Quite often the services we're designing are a service in a wider system of services. So having that view is really important. So that's useful for understanding those cross-functional relationships and identifying weakness and opportunities. Then we zoom in a bit, we get the user journey. And this is much more experiential. And this, you'll more often than not see us producing these things in conjunction with user researchers. But user journey maps visualize in fact, with all these things that I'm showing you, existing experiences or new experiences that we're trying to design for that don't yet exist. But this is really useful for showing that whole end-to-end experience, representing the process as well as pain points, emotional ups and downs, across all the channels, internal or external organizational boundaries as well. The service blueprint is probably the thing that most people expect. I think, in fact, every time any of us are on a service design engagement, this is the one artifact you can guarantee is going to come up. But there's a reason for that, because it's super useful. This is the one artifact that kind of ties so many different strands of work across a project together. So we've got that end-to-end journey across the top, and we're showing in the service blueprint how that is supported by interlinked internal, external service components, what's needed at every step of the way to make that thing happen. And it's great, again, for showing where gaps are in an existing service, where opportunities might lie, problems are, but also if we go back to prototyping, you can prototype a service with a blueprint and a user journey and an ecosystem map. You can actually get really detailed with just those three things. You can explore a lot of different aspects of a service. So I think that's enough in terms of the key kind of outputs. There's loads more, as you can probably imagine. But apart from those things, what do we do? Generally, we do a lot of user research. Quite often we wear many hats. All service designers are capable of doing research to some degree. They're always going to be doing a part of that, sometimes alone, sometimes with colleagues, user researchers. But we're definitely there. Our role is about bringing people together across org team, multidisciplinary, and we're looking to map all those actors the role they play, and understanding, what they need to do, what needs to be in place. And that front, and the end to end, the front to back, you'll often hear. So that front stage, backstage diagram that Steve showed earlier, understanding what all those things are, how they fit together, is kind of core to what we do. And then orchestrating the different design or research and design activities to improve on those, and facilitating workshops to get that co-design input. And ultimately, ensuring consistency as much as possible, because part of what service design is, as opposed to product design, is thinking about how that experience is across all different channels and touch points and products. So yeah, that's our thing. And I suppose, to sum it up, we're most effective when we can do these things. Involve users, take that human-centered design approach, collaborate with others on the project team and outside of it, and look beyond the project. So what other organizations could we involve? User groups or other organizations that might supply some part of the service, going beyond the blueprint. So it's not just about those things, and testing all the time and looking to innovate all the time. Yeah, so I'll hand over to Steve. Oh, one thing. If any of this has piqued your curiosity, there are some other great chats that we're giving this week and next. So be sure to check it out. We've got a lot of talented people on our team. We've got 17 people chatting about their various interesting projects and viewpoints on service design. So get stuck in. Right,
yeah,
Steve.
I think there is just two of note, just off the top of our head. Our colleague Paul is doing one on the 15th, his experience, which I'm going to give a bit of a flavor of in just a second. He's doing a talk on the 15th. And on the 23rd, we've got the service design takeaways, which we have a collection of people that are going to be doing some interesting discussions about what they find important in service design. So I want to give you just a couple case studies, just to give you a flavor as to the type of engagements that we get involved in. And this one in particular was quite interesting, one, the DVSA Drivers Examiner Service. And fantastically, it won the UK IT Industry Award for its accomplishments. The challenge that was set before us, and it was a multi-vendor engagement, by the way, it wasn't just BJSS and SPARCK, was replacing a manual paper-based process, which is the driver's examination. It was a part of a 5-year strategy to improve road safety and user experience and value for money at the DVSA, and to modernize their testing practices. And BJSS and SPARCK were engaged to design this single application for use daily by driver examiners to conduct these tests on various categories of vehicles, including bikes and cars and lorries and buses and so on and so forth. So the approach that we used, it was massive research exercise. 300 users were involved. It went on for several weeks, no doubt, on that one. It was identifying early adopters to help with the design cycle and to iterate through that. There was lots of in-car testing and simulation and user testing that happened, as you can see that photo to the right. Rapid iterations through that, using things like the user journey and diagram below to sort of map those out. Very successful project. They managed to have a successful live service with 100% adoption, savings of time and money, better user experience. It was a milestone for DVSA to have a service design approach, and put design at the center of this. And it obviously it won some awards for the DVSA, Kainos, and ourselves. Another interesting example is Highways England Data as a Service platform. And this was about modernization of their, to help them get on the path of being a data-driven organization, modernizing that aspect. They had this strategy that they wanted to fulfill to obviously improve reliability, safety, so ultimately have better journeys for the customers. And they needed to really, upgrade their systems and bring it all together. Their data was siloed in many different places across the organization. Through a service design approach, we went through a fast-paced 4-week discovery process, ran workshops, interviewed key user groups, and worked with the technology, the data analysts and the platform providers to understand a bit more about the technology. There was a very, very technical platform at its core, and it was about trying to figure out how to service data into this platform and then service data out to the people who would actually do the number crunching and do the analysis off of that data. Blueprints, lots of service blueprints were a way of trying to make sense of this beast of with all the disparate information, different data sources, and how to operationalize that into the platform. And the outcome was something to like this, which was, I think it was the first results using Power BI to sort of look over the data and be able to sort of picture and analyze the data through these services. So we introduced, the outcome was this data as a service platform, and taking data out of silos and unlocking the value that was sitting in these places where very few people could get access to this data. Defined a rollout of the services that sort of sat on either side of the technical platform, an operational adoption service and an operational service, and as well as an operating model to manage the platform. Yeah, so those are two pretty interesting projects that we got involved with fairly recently. And that's really it for us. One thing we want to say that this is how you can get in touch with us should you want to do that. We are hiring, we're looking for more service designers, we're looking for more designers as a whole, researchers as well. So please go to the spark.io website, our website. You can click on the join us link at the top, or you can put in this URL for the job vacancy service designer, and you can, we can have a conversation. I think that's a big thank you from us, but we have questions I can see that are on, that we have going. Thad, have you seen those? So first question that came out to us is, and please, if you have any more questions, please write them in the Q&A area within the Zoom here. That'd be really, really useful. Do you use a common prototyping platform, or is it dependent on the person or project? Thad, do you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, we have, as an organization, we have enterprise licenses on a few tools, for example, that help as part of our prototyping kit at large, if you like. So, if you just want some simple click-throughs of stuff, we've used InVision before, for example. We use Axure to get stuff kind of more to mimic the kind of more the data-driven interactions. But that's just one side of it. That's the more digital product-focused part of it. Beyond that, it really does depend on what the client has, what the project is trying to do. Because, in fact, alluding to the next question, quite often it's not digital. If you're considering the assisted digital journey, you might actually be thinking, if somebody can't access digital, you might need telephone service. So you might test that out with scripts, prototype it that way. You might also have the face-to-face interactions. So, it really does depend on what you're trying to do and who you're doing it with.
Absolutely. And we do a lot of work for government. So a lot of those non-digital aspects are really important to consider, as Thad alluded to, how those are how do different sort of even digital capable people, digitally assisted, as well as accessibility. That's really a big thing for us now, that we have to be on top of that very early and often, to make sure that we're developing a service that everyone can use.
Yeah. I mean, something else that I did mention earlier is, a lot of the outputs that we're creating, like user journey maps, or service blueprints, or ecosystem maps, value network maps, all sorts of different system mapping, to understand those relationships, who the actors and entities are, or who they could be, and what part they might play in the overall service delivery. And quite often it's just a diagram replaying different permutations, scenarios, to understand what might work better. So in a way, you can get really deep on the cheap, essentially. So it's a really good way to prototype for us.
Yeah. I do love a good Miro board.
Yeah. So I suppose it's a tool that we use, Miro or Mural, both essentially doing the same things, an online collaborative whiteboarding diagramming tool, great for workshops and diagramming, given the way that we're all working remotely now.
Yeah, it certainly played a key role for us from last March, and luckily we adopted those tools quite early before the lockdown began, when we were ready to move on those and take full advantage of them, and just see the creativity that sort of then ensued within these has been phenomenal to witness.
Yeah. So if anyone's not familiar with those, I would urge them to get a free account and play about, because they're a great way to collaborate.
And just on the tools thing, we're always looking for the latest and greatest tools, obviously in line with, safe, secure, and whatnot. But for us, if we hire somebody in who's really enthusiastic about a particular tool, then we do spend some time to get to know it and see whether it's right for the rest of us, before we start venturing down that path. But yeah, I think getting the right tool to fit the right purposes is pretty key.
Yeah, for sure. And then we've got how much consideration is given to non-digital aspects of the services, e.g. face-to-face, telephone, paper-based. As much as is warranted, for sure. I mean, given the fact that we're part of BGSS, it's a technical, heavy lifting, technical delivery company, right? That's what they've done for a long time, done it very well. And that is a big part of it, but digital is not everything. It's one side of the coin, if you like, I suppose. But quite often, a lot of the work we do, especially with NHS, is actually there to give more time to GP patient interactions, for example, to alleviate the rubbish digital stuff, or make that better, or make it go away, so that actually there's more quality interactions between people. Similarly, if we're moving from a paper-based service to a digital service, that's great, but you may never get away from paper entirely, because some people can't access digital, and we always need to be mindful of that. So yeah, I mean, what I really personally love about service design is that it does consider all of those things, right? It's about making things work for people so they can achieve whatever goal they're there to do. Obviously, digital has an amazing presents amazing opportunities. That's why we do it, but it's not the be all and end all. So I hope that's answered your question, Nick.
I think so. Only got a couple more minutes. Any other questions or comments that we can answer for you? Otherwise, we might wrap it up. Like I said, if we are the hiring hasn't stopped for us. We are full steam ahead, and growth has been phenomenal, particularly over the last 12 months. So if you are interested in service design or product design or user research, content design, yeah, strategy as well, those design roles are much in demand, and we would love to hear from you. So please go to our website, and that'll be wonderful to get some people that we can have a chat with.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for listening. Have a great one.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks very much. Bye now.